Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. How many of you know this quote? How many of you know where it comes from? This famous quote is part of one of the most famous speeches in the world, a presidential inauguration speech done by John F. Kennedy, delivered on January 20th, 1960. What made this speech so famous was not only who it was delivered by, or how he delivered it, or even what it conveyed and accomplished, but also by the factors that influenced his speech. As stated in the paper Analysis of John F. Kennedy's Presidential Inauguration Speech by Nevin Power, developments in the Cold War, such as Kennedy's pushing of the missile gap theory, the upcoming competition between capitalism and communism and the newly emerging nations of the Third World, and Kennedy's belief that the prestige of the presidency needed restoring after Eisenhower's long and relatively cautious tenure in office, all contributed to shaping the address and to what it ultimately became. Powers also states this truly was an address with massive historical consequences, brought about by its context and influences. To me, the presentation of the speech by Kennedy is what made it a speech to remember. Watching the speech, it is easy to see why America fell in love with Kennedy. He was extremely charismatic, and throughout the speech, he did a good job articulating and enunciating. He was clear and easily understandable. He took his time and went into detail, and he spoke slow, providing his audience with the time to really listen, take in what he was saying, and understand it. A final aspect that Kennedy had when presenting was simply inspiration. The way he conducted himself, the tone he used, the enthusiasm and the confidence he portrayed incited a level of inspiration throughout the world. Even just watching it, I felt inspired. Now, I don't have the same qualities as Kennedy, but don't worry, I am almost done boring you. The final aspect that makes Kennedy's speech historical is what his speech conveyed and accomplished. This speech was designed as a message to the world. There were several segments dedicated to the United States, its allies, and its foes. Kennedy made several promises and threats. He does this with yet another quote that rose to fame. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Kennedy put America back at top in his speech, and through this he conveyed hope to the American people. Kennedy was the face of change, and this speech was his first chapter in the beginning of a new America. Through all his promises of winning the missile and the space race, he gave this sense of optimism for the country, of moving forward, something they needed after Eisenhower's long reign. Finally, the most important aspect that Kennedy accomplished through his speech was uniting the country, something only a few have been able to do. America came together and did what was needed of them to make our country better and to move forward. Now, I know it sounds like such a foreign concept to us in today's world, but Kennedy proves with his speech that with the right direction, America can unite as a whole to do better. Now, I don't want to give the impression that Kennedy was perfect because, well, he is human and we all know we are not perfect. But the very, 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 very few, well, okay, so maybe he was a little closer to perfect than the rest of us. But the very few things that Kennedy could have improved on was the length of this speech. With the speech being over 15 minutes long, people could lose interest. And even though the detail Kennedy goes into is a pro, it also is a con. Because again, after a while, no matter how good you are, your audience is going to get restless and lose interest. The last critique I have for him is to be more engaged with the audience and not so much into the notes. Now, he doesn't look over an obsessive amount, but he definitely could have practiced more and memorized the speech more, making it more impactful. Kennedy's inauguration speech was one of the most famous historical speeches of all time. What made it so historically famous was the factors surrounding that time, the way he presented the speech, and finally what his speech conveyed and accomplished. As Pell states in his paper, overall this speech was uplifting and optimistic in tone, reflecting a sense of mission. John F. Kennedy's speech was hands down the greatest speeches ever delivered by United States presidents. He was charismatic, inspiring, and overall just an amazing public speaker. It would have been amazing to see what he would have accomplished and in turn what our world would look like today if he was allowed to continue as president.